Greetings, friends. I have been going through some of my books lately and thought, since we are in a holiday season during a pandemic and quite a difficult year for most of us, I wanted to share some readings on grief. And I'm not really great with the video thing, so we'll see how this goes. But the book that I want to read from today is called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And I think I'm going to go through each of what the author, Francis Weller, who has dedicated his career to grief work, calls the 5 gates of grief. And the first gate is what I'm going to talk about today and do some reading on. And the first gate he calls everything we love, we will lose. So here is a book from Francis Weller's The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And this starts on page 24. I have come to have a deep faith in grief, have come to see the way its moods call us back to soul. It is, in fact, one of the voices of the soul, asking us to face life's most difficult but essential teaching. Everything is a gift and nothing lasts. This is a painful truth. To accept this fact is to live on life's terms and not to try to deny the simple truth of loss, what the Buddhists call impermanence. When we acknowledge grief, we acknowledge that everything we love, we will lose. No exceptions. Now, of course, we want to argue this point, saying that we will keep in our hearts the love of those who depart this earth before us, our parents or our spouse or our children or our friends or, and yes, that is true. It is grief, however, that allows the heart to stay open to this love, to remember sweetly the ways these people touched our lives. It is only when we deny grief's entry into our lives that we begin to compress the breadth of our emotional experience and live shallowly. There's a poem from the 12th century that beautifully articulates this lasting truth about the risks we take when we choose to love. For those who have died, Ela Escora, these we remember. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch. To love, to hope, to dream, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools, this love, but a holy thing, to love what death can touch. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was a gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death can touch. So, I don't really have anything that profound to say. I do think that this concept of impermanence and everything we love, we lose, can feel a bit overwhelming. And depending on what your faith tradition is or your spiritual practice, it can be framed differently, what that means or the motivation or purpose behind it. I do think, though, that the teaching, at least in my personal experience, especially when I'm going through a transition or have lost a significant person in my life to death or addiction or a move and they're still alive, that it's really, really helpful to use this teaching of impermanence as a motivator to show up in our relationships, in our day-to-day life with a commitment to presence. It's definitely a practice that I, at seasons of my life, am a bit more skilled at and less caught in thinking or narrative, the inner chatter, the worries or fears that pop up as the seasons change and life presents new challenges or circumstances. But I will say that this foundational understanding of impermanence is absolutely a life-changing practice. And I think for those who have lost someone, somebody who maybe was paramount in your life. I lost my mother 3 years ago to cancer. Something changes. And I have been no stranger to suffering or loss in other ways. Big life changes, making sacrifices, saying goodbye to really important relationships. But losing someone who has been there the entire journey, it changes you. And grief isn't, at least for me around this relationship, it's not something that gets easier. It is something that grows deeper. And I think part of the expansiveness that can happen when we choose to grieve, choose to process, choose to lean in to the pain, because that's what it is. You're not avoiding it, you're feeling it. And sometimes it feels like a tide pool in the ocean and you don't know when you're going to get another breath of air. And other times it's the lake is serene that you're on and it's a crystal clear day. But this teaching of impermanence is a really helpful baseline to come back to when facing this reality that everything we love, we will lose. Knowing that, accepting that, expecting that. While that might sound kind of pessimistic, I don't think it is. I think it's actually quite beautiful, recognizing everything as temporary. There's a value to that requires a different type of intention in your life and in the way you love, in the way you work, in the way that you show up in your community or show up in your relationships. So I think I'll maybe stop for today, and I'm curious for those that did take the time to watch these series of videos, if you have anything that you want to share or any questions or things that this made you reflect on or think of, feel free to comment. Bye, everybody.